Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber, and alongside me is Logan Camden, and we have got lots of great basketball to talk about today. We're going to preview both conference finals matchups, but first, we have to start with the disastrous Game 7 performance that we saw from Philly. Logan, yet another disappointment from, to me, the two biggest playoff underperformers of this generation, James Harden and Joel Embiid. What did you take away from this for them?
I just think we have to start about how disappointing it was. And I think the biggest thing that makes this kind of sad, really disappointing, is the fact that both of their legacies were on the line in this series. This is arguably, after all this turmoil, like you said, this is the big storyline about both of these guys. Their playoff letdowns. They shrink in the spotlight. In the biggest moments, they just don't show up. That's why this game was so important for them. It's possibly the last time that James Harden is going to have a shot maybe at winning a title, because we've seen a steady decrease from him over these past few years. For Joel Embiid, who has not been healthy in certain playoff matchups. He hasn't performed up to expectation in playoff matchups. This is the time for them to correct those narratives. This is their time to erase them. Harden can get over that hump, finally get to the Eastern Conference Finals again, chase that final ring potentially. Embiid, he's a big-time playoff performer. He can show up, and they completely shrunk. They completely shrunk under the spotlight. They completely disappeared in this big game, and I thought it was funny. I mean, during that one stretch of the game, you've got some DeAnthony Melton threes. You've got Daniel House chucking up shots. This is where James Harden and Embiid, I mean, you feel the game. You feel the momentum just completely spinning out of control. You're losing all control you have on this game, and they just defer. It's really disappointing, and from both of them. I thought we saw some real flaws in Joel Embiid's game that weren't really prevalent in these earlier series. How dependent he is on that post fadeaway, and how dependent he is on that jump shot falling. How he doesn't really like to get uber physical and super physical on the low block. How double teams can really affect him. He had some bad turnovers when they were sending doubles at him, and he's just not making either the right decision or he's not picking up on the double fast enough. I think I want to give Embiid a lot of credit for taking the pain away, as he did all series long, blocking shots, completely stifling the Celtics when they went there. But I think you see a lot of his shortcomings as a versatile, switchable defender, a la the Bam Adebayos. Tatum was abusing that switch on Embiid throughout the game, and Embiid just doesn't look comfortable out there. So I think we saw some real shortcomings in Embiid's game, and then we just saw, I'm not going to say I'm surprised about Harden. This is kind of the Harden that we expected. He had two really big games in this series, and that's something that I think we have to criticize Joel Embiid for, is a big time in this series. Any of their wins, I mean, he wasn't the best player on the floor. Definitively. Harden pulled his weight in those two games, and they eke out both of those wins. It just never felt like we saw Embiid at a real MVP level throughout this entire series. Like, he felt just like an average superstar, and it's just really disappointing, man. Both of these guys, this is going to be their legacy, Carson. I don't see Harden ever getting any better. I think this is a stain on Doc Rivers' resume as well, and I think a lot of people are going to blame this solely on Doc. I think that's something that we have to get away from. We have to criticize Embiid. We have to criticize Harden. It is as much on their shoulders as it is on Doc Rivers' shoulders, but I think Doc's probably out of town too after this season, but yeah, I mean, this is as big of a stain to have somebody show you up like that, like Tatum, to 50-piece you, and neither of you look like you want the ball, you're ready for the moment. It's kind of what we should have expected. I'm almost disappointed that I was as hard on Boston as I was coming into this game, Carson. I talked about Boston potentially disappearing under the spotlights. Harden and Embiid have consistently showed us that this is what they do in the biggest games.
And that's why it's so funny that it suddenly seems like everybody's coming to this realization, Logan. Like, you put Joel Embiid at number 8 in your player rankings ahead of the playoffs one time, and everybody loses their minds, That's what I did, because there's an established precedent with Embiid of his game completely falling off, like, significantly in the playoffs. And there are very concrete reasons for that, some of which you addressed, but I just want to really iterate how much this is not a one-time thing, how we should not be surprised by this, because since 2018, Joel Embiid in the regular season has been a 28, 11.5, 3.5 guy on 53.5% effective field goal percentage. In the playoffs, in that same span, which is since his first postseason, 24 a night, 4-point per game decrease. 11 and 3 on 49.1% effective field goal percentage, 28% from three, with nearly a full turnover more than assists per game. And I think there are three primary things that have worn him down, and this is exactly what I addressed in that rant long ago, but a lot of you guys may be new to the show, so I want to hit on it again. Number one, his limitations as an actual shot maker. Everybody talks about his reliance on getting to the line, which he is still great at in the playoffs. I mean, he is like the best foul drawing big man that we've seen. And I'm not talking about Shaq, Wilt. These guys could eat up more attempts, but that's because of pure physical dominance, right? Embiid is getting guys to reach. He's getting guys to bite on fakes, finding them out of position, all that. And some of that translates, but as we know, it's not enough. Like each of the last two postseasons, he goes down 2.5 free throw attempts per game. It's a same thing that has really hindered Harden a lot of times in the playoffs. You have to be a great shot maker. You are not going to win playoff series by just tricking your way to the line. And this season, he was a nearly 46% jump shooter. He was 33% from deep. These playoffs, 33% on jumpers. 18% from deep. And that is a majority of his offense. If it's out of pick and pop, we talked about Boston playing that deep drop. Well, Embiid was getting fed looks out of that. If it's his face-up game out of the post, his back-to-the-basket game, you mentioned the turnarounds. Like, he is a jump shooter. And he is a jump shooter whose jump shot has consistently left him in the playoffs. Last year, he was 34% on jumpers. And so you look at the overall trend. The league average effective field goal percentage since 2018 in the playoffs is 52.5. Joel Embiid's is 49. This year it was 44.8. So to be significantly below average efficiency as a shot maker, you are never going to be a great playoff performer. This is why I said a few weeks ago, I think Jokic is a better playoff scorer than Joel Embiid because he is a better shot maker, because his floaters, his hooks, his jumper out of pick and pop, out of the post, doesn't go away. Consistently elite efficiency. Embiid has been the exact opposite, and that's going to kill you. And in a matchup like this against Al Horford, when he finds himself with a really good one-on-one defender who's got active hands, constantly affecting that jumper, who is disciplined but physical, right? He's not just going to bully him to his spots easily, and he's also not going to eat up those free throw attempts. He has real problems. And then you added on to that the fact that, yeah, he has an inability to read double teams at a high level. It was remarkable to me how much people acted like he was dissecting that Brooklyn defense because game one, they created a lot of open threes. He was solid in that game. But games 2 and 3, Brooklyn was able to limit him to 17 points per game. He had 13 turnovers to 9 assists, and the team offensive rating was under 109, which is almost a 10-point drop-off from the regular season because you can affect him off the catch when you're throwing aggressive doubles at him, right? Sometimes he struggles with the catch. You can cause him to lose his handle when he's going against the double. He's just not sharp enough there. He's going to commit more offensive fouls with that pressure on him, especially against smaller lineups where guys can sell that contact a bit more. Length can affect his passing. And for the most part, he's just not going to make the best possible pass in any scenario. Like, yeah, he may get the defense in rotation, but it's going to be, okay, who's the nearest open guy? Well, I'm just going to swing it to him, and then, okay, someone's able to recover to him, so now he's got to swing it to another shooter, right? Which can create good shots. But when you're comparing that to the prospect of, oh my God, regular season Joel Embiid, who's going to give me 33 a night with blazing efficiency, yeah, you'll take him just sort of throwing it out of a double and maybe resetting the offense, maybe creating a slight advantage. So it happened again this year. Like, 3.9 turnovers to 2.7 assists per game. 8 of his 11 career playoff series, more turnovers than assists. And it was more prevalent in the Brooklyn series when all they were doing was throwing doubles at him, but still in this series, you saw him struggle with double teams. That is a real limitation when you're supposed to be an offensive hub, an offensive superstar. And then it's his overall physical condition. Injuries, obviously. And this year, he's playing through the knee injury, right? So maybe he is 10, 15% worse than what you would normally expect or hope to see from a fully healthy Joel Embiid. But there comes a point where if that is an inevitability, it's not an excuse. Like, you can't talk to me about healthy Joel Embiid if he doesn't exist in the playoffs. I'm sorry, I just don't buy that. Every time they have been to the second round, he has missed at least one playoff game. That's 5 for 5. So that is obviously a major problem. And also, I feel like when you talk about physical condition, you mentioned how great he was as a rim protector in this series, and it was the best rim protection that I think we've seen from him on the playoff stage. I mean, almost 3 blocks a game in this run. Fantastic. But it also felt to me like the more he exerted himself defensively, the more he was prone to stagnating the offense, to settling offensively. And that's why it's like great. People talked about his defensive dominance throughout these playoffs. It's awesome. It's great. But when you're giving me 23 a night on subpar efficiency with terrible playmaking, I really don't care. You're supposed to be a top 5 player on the planet. You were the MVP. People were saying he was the best player alive. And so you can't have this trade-off where it's maybe I do this better, but I'm not going to excel at the thing that makes me so great in the regular season. So I've said it before. I think he has more to prove on the playoff stage than any other guy in this superstar tier. James Harden is the biggest playoff underperformer of all time to me, but it's just not a surprise when you see it from him. But Joel Embiid's history, Logan, in elimination series, we can go through every single one. He has underperformed dramatically. Last year versus the Heat, right? He had the orbital fracture, but he was under 20 a night. He was 43% from the field, 26% from 3, more turnovers than assists. 2021, they lost to the Hawks, one of the most embarrassing talent deficit upsets in recent years. 2020, put up his raw numbers against the Celtics, but he had 3 times as many turnovers as assists. He was 48% effective field goal percentage, inefficient again, and they got swept. 2019 versus the Raptors, under 18 a night, 37% shooting, more turnovers than assists. Jimmy was way better than him. He was the reason they were in that series. And then 2018 versus the Celtics, 23 a night, 44% from the field, 24% from 3. Of course, I think he's a better player than he was in those first couple years. I think he's the best version he's ever been. But the things that were supposed to be the key improvements, his shot making as a jump shooter, his playmaking, his ability to read those double teams and to actually create offense for others, those completely fell apart like they always have in the playoffs, as did his health. So the discourse went to a crazy place this year, man. I had somebody in our TikTok comment section when I said that Embiid was the number 8 guy for me heading into the playoffs, saying that I was putting Shaq with a lethal jumper at number 8. Like, this, I think, was a telling moment for Embiid, and he still has to really improve in these categories before I'm putting him as a top 5 player in the league.
I mean, he just hasn't shown on the playoff stage that he can even reliably be a number 1. Your number 1s in the playoffs, guys. It's like during the regular season, the Sixers formula, right? Embiid has to get that 33 to get them wins. Embiid has consistently been below that. And I think another limitation too, Carson, that you didn't bring up, you think about how Jokic can bait guys and how he has all these fakes and all these he's got a deep bag. Like, Embiid doesn't have counters. He doesn't have setups. He doesn't have, it's consistently settling for stuff throughout. And I think those are all areas he has to get better in before I think we should even legitimately consider a team that he's leading as to be legitimate contenders. Like, that's something that is going to continue to happen anytime Embiid is in the playoffs. He is going to get swarmed. He is going to get double teamed. What happens when you throw a double team at Nikola Jokic? He finds the right guy every time, and he's going to burn you every time. Now, I'm not trying to just apples to apples compare the two, but that's the thing. It's like there are no limitations with Jokic, right? There's just, he has a counter for everything you do. If you overcommit to something, or if you bite on a pump fake, he's going to hit that touch shot. If you send a double at him, he's going to find that guy in the corner. There's just ways to stop Joel Embiid the way you can't stop other superstars. I don't know what you do from here moving on. Like, I don't know how you get another superstar that's a number 2 with James Harden. And like I said, I think the big thing is until Embiid proves that he can do this on the playoff stage, he's not a number 1. This is not the performance of a number 1. It's not the performance of an MVP guy, let alone a number 1 superstar guy. I mean, I think you're right. Would you have Embiid, where you ranked him in your playoff performers? I think that's a really good ranking. But after this, would you rank Embiid even lower now?
I feel pretty good about that. I think that Anthony Davis I had below him because I had questions about his availability, his offensive consistency. I would move AD above him now because I think he's in a different stratosphere. Defensively, obviously, and offensively, his game translates. But I think that I would also probably move LeBron below Embiid. I was a big believer in LeBron still maybe reaching a top 5 player ceiling. I don't think he's done that consistently enough to justify it. Obviously, he was great in Game 6, but he's able to benefit from a situation in which he has a lot of secondary creation. He does have Anthony Davis. Like, if it was, hey, LeBron, carry a team to the finals again, I don't think he's capable of that. Not that Embiid is. But, yeah, he's in that tier, right? He's not in the Jokic, Steph, Giannis tier. And I think that this showed that. But I do think the reality is also that James Harden embarrassed himself yet again. And, yeah, I mean, he had 2 awesome games, 2 signature Harden games. But you know what he averaged in playoff losses this year, this series, Logan? 12.5 points per game on 21.5% from the field, 13% from deep. Like, he has major issues that continue to reveal themselves, and the biggest one that we talked about throughout is his inability to score inside at this age, his inability to explode past people and to finish against length. So the guy goes 19 of 61 inside of 8 feet in these playoffs. That's 31%. And yeah, he had like the best mid-range shooting run of his playoff career, which was fun. But he is so singularly reliant on that pull-up jumper that when it's not there, he is a 0 as a scorer. And it's just unfortunate that he was never able to put his entire game offensively together on the playoff stage, because in the previous years we saw his lack of versatility, his predictability, right? The heavy reliance on, all right, step back threes, let me get to the line, maybe get to my floater range. And when his three-point shot left him for the better part of his Houston years, he consistently saw a drop-off in efficiency from beyond the arc, and when I think his body just wore down a bit overall due to that style. And again, in a best-of-7 series, you have to have variety. You have to have counters. You have to have that level of versatility and unpredictability to consistently attack a defense with maximum effectiveness, and Harden never had that. And now he's just a shell of the player he once was. I know that he feels that he's the same guy, but I think they have to move on from Harden. I don't think he's a reliable enough perimeter creator, because they need a great perimeter creator. And people talk about Dame. I mean, that would be great, getting Dame to Philly, right? Then maybe they could be a legit contender, because all of a sudden Embiid doesn't have to be your best offensive player for you to win playoff series. But how do they make that happen when they don't have draft capital? I mean, they've given up their first in 23, 25, and 27, so there's no maneuverability there. You move Tobias Harris in his big contract, but like, you need the carrot to dangle with that. He's not an asset. He's a negative given just the size of that contract. But I want to see them go all in for this year, because you still have rookie deal Tyrese Maxey, which is an incredible value contract. Maxey's a star, and don't talk to me about trading Maxey for like a star right now, because that would really piss me off. But I don't know what they throw in there with Tobias Harris that makes people lick their lips and say, great, let's make something happen. But I do think Harden's gone. I think he's going to go to Houston, and I think he's going to, enjoy the old spots, if you know what I mean, and that'll be that. I don't know how you bring him back, but I also don't know what the fix is. So it just remains a problematic situation in Philly, and rife with disappointment, as it's been for a half decade. They have not once overachieved in the playoffs, nor has Joel Embiid, nor has James Harden.
Nor is Doc Rivers. I think that's the other big part of this is, it's so funny to me, man, and it does make me mad that, again, I predicted that this was going to be such a close Game 7, because all three of these people, James Harden, Joel Embiid, Doc Rivers, have consistently let us down on the playoff stage. And Doc, in this run, I think back especially to this Game 7, the third quarter run that we have where the Celtics just take over. There is not a one timeout spent by Doc Rivers right there that's thinking, oh, let's limit this run. And I think the biggest issue was Jayson Tatum continues to kill them, right? It's not like when you see your stars pick apart the same coverage, the same thing that you're throwing at them, you're going to switch some stuff up. Tatum is just eating on it. They get that Joel Embiid switch throughout the third quarter. They get it throughout the game. And yet here is Doc. And I mean, you heard him in, I think, one of the huddles, Carson. He goes, let's not do anything different. We just need to play hard. I don't know, Doc. Let's switch something up maybe. Let's run a different coverage. Let's burn a timeout. Let's rally the stars and get on them. Hey, guys, we can't really settle for, we can't have Melton and House taking over the offense right now. I need you guys to take over something. And throughout Doc's years, there have been a lack of adjustments, a lack of good coaching decisions, and a lack of motivation, man. I think I saw it on Doc's face during this game. It was just like a look of desperation, of sadness that he knows this is the way he's going out during that third quarter run. You see it on his face. I'm disappointed in him too, just the fact that, especially in Game 7, you don't burn the timeout, but the lack of adjustments when Tatum was on in this game really disappointed me. I'm not letting Embiid switch out there as much. I'm doing something to get him back. I'm making an adjustment because Tatum was consistently killing this team out of that switch. And I am interested, though, why do you think Harden's, why is he gone? Why are you so sure of that? Just with the rumors, just with the situation, why are you so certain that he's out of town?
Because there was talk that he wanted to go to Houston and the regular season, seemingly real talk, and then he had a legitimately embarrassing final 2 games to lead to another embarrassing playoff loss for the Sixers. And I just don't think that he's going to justify a big long-term extension in his mid-30s, as I don't know where you want to put him in the regular season. Like, obviously he was in that All-NBA conversation, but I just don't think he's a top 20 player I want for the playoffs, and I don't want to be attached to him long-term.
So do you think he's just giving up on getting a ring or even chasing that, or he just doesn't care?
What contender wants to give James Harden a massive contract right now? I don't think that guy's out there. And I do think that Doc is gone, because I think that we are now in scapegoat central. And I will say, I mean, we did see them throw a couple different coverages at Tatum, right? We saw drop. We saw them switching Embiid, which to me is stupid. I mean, I don't know why that's the adjustment you go to. We did see them blitz a little bit, but Tatum was just unbelievable in this game. I don't know if they were going to take away Tatum. So I blame Doc certainly the least out of all of the big names here. I think Harden and Embiid sucked. I think that is what this comes down to, bottom line. That being said, I do think with this pattern of playoff disappointment, with Doc's overall reputation, he is probably gone, and I'm fine with that. I don't think Doc is a particularly good NBA coach, but I also don't want to look at this and say he's the one at fault here, because this comes down to your superstars. When your superstars get outplayed like this, obviously in this game, but also in the home stretch of Game 6, it's on them. And I know that there was the Embiid quote circulating about how me and James can't win alone. That's why basketball's 5-on-5. And that quote was a bit better within the context, because it got clipped off in a way that was a bit unfair to Embiid. But before that, he talks about, hey, this is on us. We have to be better. Nevertheless, though, I mean, this really is about you, Joel, and James. You let your team down. Tobias Harris played fine. Tyrese Maxey had a couple of massive games in this series. Your supporting cast, the Meltons and the Paul Reeds of the world, and even the Nyangs of the world, busted their asses, and you sucked. And I'm not going to expect everybody to be perfect and oppressor, but a guy who does have a tendency to be a bit arrogant, and obviously all of the MVP talk this year was pretty absurd. The whole extended quote about why is there any pressure on me? And that's just his persona, right? He's a cocky guy. But you got to own it even more than that, because this is on you definitively. Okay, so Boston is through, Logan. Rematch with Miami. 3 of the last 4 years, this has been the Eastern Conference Finals that we've gotten. What's the first key that stands out to you in that series?
I think there's a lot of keys. My first is just how Boston is going to defend Jimmy Butler. I think that's probably the first area I go. I think they're really well equipped with Tatum and Jaylen Brown, but it didn't really matter what the Knicks threw at Jimmy. It didn't really matter what Milwaukee threw. I thought Milwaukee should have tried different things with Giannis, but Jimmy has been able to get to his spots. He's been able to just at will relentlessly kind of get to where he wants to go, and I think Boston's really well equipped to defend anybody, but I don't think that Boston has a distinct advantage in the defensive category either, because it's like I've been expecting Miami to get out-hustled, to get outworked this entire run. I don't think that's going to happen. Miami's been the hungriest team in these playoffs this entire time. They led in deflections. They led in loose balls recovered. They've led in all the hustle categories. They've consistently rebounded well against teams that they shouldn't rebound well against. So I think that in the hustle categories, I think Miami is going to do really well. But like I said, I think it's going to come down to a lot of how the stars play, and that's Tatum, what version of him we get. I'm so proud of Tatum because when, he answered the call. I mean, the pressure's on, and we know how fast media moves these days. 1 bad game, and that's what happens. 2 bad games, oh, you're getting thrown down the trash chute. 3 bad games, they're burning the trash up, and Tatum was getting burned up by the media, as he should. It was 3 really bad first quarters. It was 3 abysmal first halves. He was still very effective, but he answered the call. I'm humbly one of the best basketball players on the planet, and he proved that. I mean, the most points in a Game 7. Again, the thing that we have consistently said here is that what separates great superstars from other great superstars is the consistency at which they're able to do it, right? Joel Embiid certainly looked like one of the best players on the planet and the MVP of the league in a few games, right? Maybe 1 or 2. But it's the superstars that can do it every single night is what we value more. That's why Nikola Jokic, I think, you have to give him such credit. So for Tatum, we just need to see it consistently, and it's hard. It's always hard when a guy with Tatum's skill set, when he's so predicated on the pull-up jump shooting, on the tough shot making, that shot can disappear if it's not on. But you see, when he gets in rhythm, when he hits that first one, it's that easy. So I need to just see Tatum be more on, and I guess I want to see Tatum be more aggressive, Carson, when that shot isn't falling, because I think it's going to be inevitable. I think Tatum's going to have great nights when the shot is falling, when he is on and nothing can miss, but I also think there's going to be games, and he's proven that he can still be effective without his shot falling, but we need to see better Tatum. I think we need to see the Celtics lean into Jaylen Brown more too, just with the ball in his hands late in games. I want to see him get more PT down the stretch. I want them to be more involved in the offense. What I really think it's going to come down to, and this is a boring answer, Carson, for both of these teams, I think a lot of it is going to be predicated on jump shooting. These are two very jump shot dependent teams that are really good in the drive and kick, at attacking closeouts, at getting downhill, and then kicking it to shooters. We saw the Celtics. I noted this in this last series. Struggled with wide open threes. Struggled with open threes point blank. And I think that's where a lot of shots are going to come from. You have two teams that are pretty good at protecting the paint. Bam Adebayo, Al Horford, Robert Williams, all on the low block. They're going to be good at taking the paint away, which means a lot of shots are going to come from behind the arc. We know what Miami likes to do with the pick and roll. You get a screener with your guy up top. So I think it's going to come down to shooting. Can the Celtics hit open shots? And then can Miami... what is Boston going to do against the pick and roll? I think they need to either switch everything because you can, and you have a bunch of switchable, versatile pieces that aren't going to burn you. I don't mind even switching a smaller guy on Bam Adebayo because, look, Bam's a good offensive piece when he's on, but it's not like I'm going to expect him to kill me from the low block. Miami's going to pull a lot of threes out of that pick and roll, and they are looking to create a lot of those threes. I think it is going to come down to, I don't know, a lot of those things, how the star plays, how Jimmy, JB, and Tatum do, but these teams shoot a lot of threes every single night. These are two of the most frequent three-point shooting teams in these playoffs. Boston has consistently shot poorly. Miami has been inconsistent night to night. So I'm interested in seeing how all those pieces shoot, how they defend it. But I think we're going to see a lot of threes in this series, Carson. I think it is going to be very three-point dependent, and who can knock down more open looks, who can hustle more, and who can get back. I do think this is going to be a real tight-knit series, though, man. I've counted Miami out. I'm not ready to do that again in this series.
The way that I look at the keys to this series first is, how does Miami pull the upset? Because my expectation is that Boston wins this series. Boston should win this series. They are in a different league in terms of talent, but we know what Miami is capable of, the areas in which they can out-execute you. And I think, although this is a very different series than that Miami-Milwaukee one, some of the same key blueprint elements apply, because it's just, how do you beat a team that is that much more talented than you? And the first thing I look at is, how soundly can Jimmy Butler outplay Jayson Tatum? Because that's what you need. First thing, your best player to be better than the more talented team's best player, and that's what we saw against the Bucks. But think about what it took for them to beat those Bucks in those last two games, right? Jimmy gets 56, he gets 42 in game 5, unbelievably clutch performances, on top of all the other things that went wrong for the Bucks, like their late game offensive meltdowns, their complete disadvantage in the coaching battle. And Jimmy has been the better player than Jayson Tatum in these playoffs. I mean, 31 a night on 62% true shooting. Obviously, Tatum has had some awesome performances, but has been erratic, like has had some inexcusable stretches with his shot making leaving him. But Jimmy's come back to earth a bit these last two games, and obviously Tatum just had a masterpiece. I do think that Jimmy is more reliable because of the ways in which he gets his buckets, his physicality, his ability to get to the line, the consistency of his two-way impact, also his reliable decision-making, and the pull-up jump shooting. I mean, there were insane moments against Milwaukee. It wasn't as insane against New York, and he was still able to be very effective because I just think he's a guy who gets to his spots quite consistently. Tatum, you're right. I mean, you have the 0 of 8, 0 of 6, 0 of 10 starts consecutively, and then you have the 51 piece. But the key difference to me in that Game 7 was that we saw him come out weaponizing his ability to get downhill, his size and athletic and physical advantages, because he's not going to be a consistently great pull-up jump shooter. Like, we know that. That's why he's capable of falling into these terrible lulls, because he settles consistently. And when you look at the shifts, in games 4 and games 5 were terrible first halves, but pretty good second halves. A lot of it was just him coming out and committing to getting to the rim, getting at least into that painted area. This one, he doesn't make a 3 until the last minute of the first half, but he is absolutely torching Philly out of pick and roll, driving, and a lot of it out of the post, where you just saw, okay, great, I have DeAnthony Melton on me. Well, that's barbecue chicken. And he is so skilled out of there with his footwork and the size and strength advantages and his shot making ability from that mid-range area, which we have not seen him rely on as much throughout these playoffs, that's a really good version of Jayson Tatum. And I do think Jimmy's going to be on him probably in this series. I think that's what they need to do, and that's not a particularly easy matchup to handle for Jayson Tatum. But I think we need to get good Tatum. And again, there's always the possibility of him that his decision-making goes awry, right? If you throw traps at him, how does he handle that? Is he making the proper drive and kick reads? So that's key number one, I think. And then there's the collective just execution element, right? Between hustle, between decision-making, between coaching. That is where Miami thrives. If you look at the Milwaukee series, it's okay. Bud is still going to rigidly play this drop coverage. Jimmy's going to torch that. The other guards are going to torch that. Oh, you're going to overhelp with Giannis in that rover roll. Great. We're going to create open catch and shoot looks. And then offensively, right, there's going to be a bit of self-sabotage from for Milwaukee, sticking rigidly to those Giannis post-ups, not getting good looks. And then we see the New York series, right, Spo just schooling Tibbs with the combination of zones and traps and all these different coverages that cause that offense to stagnate, loading up the paint and forcing them to beat with their spot-up shooting, which they couldn't do. And then it's everything you said about just the overall hustle and consistent intensity. We've seen Boston have lapses there. I mean, Game 1 against Philly, Game 4 against Philly. Those should be Boston wins, but they're not because they come out lazy and disengaged, particularly on the defensive end of the floor, but also at times settling for pull-up threes and not, imposing themselves getting downhill on offense. So all these things are real, and they can swing games. It shouldn't swing a series, but it can swing games. And then I agree with you on the shooting ceiling, right? Miami was able to beat New York while having an off-shooting series because New York just wasn't that much more talented, and Julius Randle sucked, and they couldn't, make a perimeter shot, and Spo completely outcoached Tibbs, all these things coming together. But to beat the Bucks, they had to make over 15 threes a night on 45% from deep, and I think against a Boston team that is, again, with a similar talent advantage to what Milwaukee had, you have to shoot the hell out of the ball. Kevin Love has got to be nails off the catch. Max Strus, Caleb Martin, Gabe Vincent, all these guys have got to really consistently make their looks from the perimeter, and that's how you then unlock the ultimate offensive ceiling for Miami. It's really good Jimmy and really good shooting.
Yeah, and on the other side of that, I think Miami is always going to be there in the hustle quotient. The one thing that really scares me about this Miami defense from other series is the depth of good downhill creators that Boston does have, because this is something that we thought that it was going to bite. It was going to bite other teams. It was going to bite Miami on the tail. All these other matchups that we had. Because of the talent area, right? We thought Milwaukee was going to be able to get downhill. I thought New York with RJ, with Brunson, with Randall, they were all going to be able to physically impose themselves on these Miami defenders. This is the one matchup where I really do think it matters, because you're not taking on Julius Randle, who can settle for that step-back jumper, for RJ Barrett, who doesn't have the tightest handle, doesn't really want the ball in his hands, doesn't really want to get downhill as much. You've got really dependable guards throughout this Boston roster that I just think physically outmatch and are more talented than the Miami defenders. Shout out Max Strus, shout out Gabe Vincent, shout out Kyle Lowry for what they've been able to do up to here. Look, man, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, though. I don't think any of these guys are great defenders at their point in their careers. I don't think Vincent and Strus are good defenders point blank. I think Lowry can be game to game, but they're not great lockdown defenders. I think Boston has the size advantage there, has just the creation ability. Smart can get downhill. Brogdon is really good at getting downhill. Derek White, when he wants to, can get downhill. And if you get these switches, that's the real area that I think about too, is with screening and stuff like that, especially if you're running that Horford, White, Smart, Tatum, Brown lineup. If you get switches off of screens where you can attack Tatum on Vincent, Tatum on Strus, Tatum on Lowry, Brown on any of those guys, I think that's really where Boston holds a real distinct advantage. And like I said, even when you're not getting those switches, when you get it to Brogdon, to White, or to Marcus Smart, any three of those guys I think hold physical advantages over the Miami guards. I think that Miami is going to hustle hard. They are going to fly around the court like they always do, but I just think schematically straight up, I think they are at a defensive disadvantage taking on the wealth of creators Boston has. It's something, like I said, that we expected to bite them in the New York series and the Milwaukee one. This is one where I really think it matters. Again, because Boston has these wealth of creators that you get one switch, and it's a really good matchup for Boston. So I think that's huge. And I don't really know if Miami has an answer for it. I just don't think they have a wealth of impactful defenders, perimeter or interior. You've got Jimmy and you've got Bam, but those are your really only pluses defensively.
And how do you take away the drive and kick game? Mm-hmm. I just think it's very difficult. And on the other side of the ball, you talk about Boston's ability to attack mismatches with those switches. Miami is not going to be able to create mismatches offensively with Boston's switching scheme. And I think that's a huge thing is we've seen Miami create more offense out of pick and roll than any other team in these playoffs. Between pick and roll ball handlers, pick and roll roll men, they're creating 34.6 points per game. That's number one out of the playoff field. But a lot of that has been against drop coverage. And a lot of that has been, okay, well, Gabe Vincent, Kyle Lowry, these guys can actually get pretty good looks off of drop coverage as just good pull-up shooters with plenty of room to pull. A team that is limited athletically, that doesn't have a lot of those big, aggressive downhill guys, but can shoot the hell out of the ball. That's good for them. Boston's going to be switching everything because every one of their guys can guard every one of Miami's guys, basically. Like, you're just not going to have those same opportunities kind of handed to these perimeter ball handlers. And when you get a Tatum onto Gabe Vincent switch, like, that's advantage Boston still. So that's where I do think the talent advantage here is evident, and I just ultimately would feel foolish trying to pick any other Miami advantage to overcome that. Like, there's a different depth of creators. There is a really high shooting ceiling here. These two top wings can dominate, and the overall defensive ceiling that Boston has with their personnel is so high. I would be tempted to pick Boston in 5. I'm not going to do that because I can't to Miami after all the overachievement that we've seen from them. And I don't even know if you can call it overachievement. Overachieving talent, but it's just kind of what they do. But I am going to go Boston in 6. They're just that much more talented. And I don't think that they have weaknesses that Miami can pinpoint in the same way. Like, yeah, they do have self-inflicted wounds often, but most of that is truly self-imposed. And if they are in a spot where they approach this series with the appropriate intensity, and maybe this Philly series was the swift kick in the ass they needed to dial in a bit more, then I think they should get out of here in 6.
Yeah, I swift kick in the ass is good. I don't know if you can give Boston a swift kick in the ass. I don't know if they receive. We need to pull Red Foreman out from that 70s show to give them one to make sure that they're fully woke up. I know that Boston is still prone to lapses in effort, in game-to-game, night-to-night, showing up. That's a real factor to me. I'm hoping that this was the wake-up, the bell ringing for them to get them ready for the rest of these playoffs. It should have been gone off, but I'm going to go Boston in 7. There's still something that I think Boston has the massive talent advantage, and if we were looking at this, everybody shows up every night. We get the best 2 versions of these teams every single night. I would take Boston in 5, but I know Boston. I know Boston a little too well to expect that they're just going to handle business straight up like we expect them to, and I know Miami too well to expect them to just lay down and roll over like a dog and give them this series. So I think Miami's hustle and grit is going to pull them out an extra 2 games in this one, and they're going to force it 7. I think Jimmy is going to turn it up a couple games, but ultimately I do expect Boston to pull this out. But I'm not going to underestimate Miami in the games department again. I think it goes 7, and I'm still going to pick Boston. I do think flat out they are just the better team, and I don't think there's a lot you can do, like you said, to exploit anything that they do poorly. Again, I think Boston's biggest enemy is themselves. Every single night, Boston's biggest enemy is their bad tendencies, their bad decision-making, their lulls, their effort, and that's all on Boston. If Boston plays their best basketball, this shouldn't be a series. Now, like I said, I don't expect that consistently, so give me them in 7, but I'm not just going to wipe away all of Boston's shortcomings in these playoffs.
Neither am I. That's why I'm going 6. Like, if I thought this Boston team was going to throw their best punch every game, I would probably take Boston in 4, dude. I mean, they are, like, that talented, but their tendencies are very real, and that does matter. I just think you need superhuman Jimmy, superhuman shooting. You need to really clearly win the execution, hustle, coaching battles, and all that coming together it just feels like a bit too much. Like, this isn't the Knicks, right? I mean, this team is really, really specially talented.